you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
This was from the original, so there was something newer that I didn't copy.
Is this the new one?
No.
Then this must be it then. The priority recommendations.
What's the date on the top that you know?
Yeah, that's 2022.
Yeah, that's the one I copied.
Okay.
So you have something.
Well, I remember, Nan, you know the thing that you, actually, I can pull it up, Mary, in my email. It's the one that Nan circulated and then had approved for posting. Do you remember that? That's actually what the addendum is. And then this is all the papers was included, but that summary document is the one that, here, let me just see if I can have it.
The one we just got sent today?
I don't know if it's the same one. I want to just,
Nan, what I sent the board, what I gave the board today was the Hospitality Evaluation Report 2022 Summary of Report Recommendations.
Okay, that last page.
I gave them page 25 as the cover, and then 1 through 24. Leslie is looking for something newer than the report from 2022.
yes, this is updated.
This says final July 1st, 2022.
Would that be, because Nan, do you recall, I'm wondering, the summary document that you sent to me and to Joe, and then we sent to the full board, I think that was what was posted to the public as the sort of a summary addendum. And then, hold on a second, let me just.
Well, the whole hospitality report was included in the comprehensive plan as the addendum, not just that one page.
Exactly. So maybe, I know, but I didn't know if that one page would be helpful for us to use as a conversation guide, or we just, however you wanted to organize the discussion. I just thought that was a very condensed.
I mean, I can put that up on the screen if you want.
Oh, great. That'd be great. If that works for everybody. And I don't know how well we'll be able to see it, but sure. Because I think that was even more than this.
So, before we do that though, I kind of wanted to have more of a general discussion about where you're at, what you're looking to have done, what the logistics of getting it done would be.
So I was thinking that we could start off with creating the hospitality overlay districts, because we have two, how do we want to say? We have two proposed ventures in the Washington Hollow area, and we just don't want to hold them up any longer.
Right, okay.
I mean, what does everybody else think about that?
I think also, Nan, we did talk about, I think at the last meeting, and I know that Joe and I have talked about it, that because we have monies that have been donated to the town specifically for the hospitality report, we didn't want to conflate that exercise with all of the other zoning recommendations that the board has received, zoning updates or changes that we've received from the planning board and the
So this part of the meeting is strictly hospitality.
Exactly. Well, Mary, I think we had the other also as a conversation piece on the agenda for tonight. Yeah.
But that's going to start at 7. So
Oh.
Doing the first hour.
Oh my gosh,
just this.
sorry.
It's just this.
Okay, great.
And then 7
Perfect.
move on.
Great, that's great. So we do want to talk about, I didn't even know, think we were going to get to that piece tonight.
So just in the hospitality review, what we want to do moving on from just with the hospitality review. And my hope would have been like the hospitality overlay districts, if we could discuss that.
I think what we approved though in the addendum was a recommendation for 2 districts.
Yes.
One being in the Washington Hollow area, and the other being in the area designated as right outside of the village.
Yeah.
to me, the question mark there is what constitutes Washington Hollow exactly? And what does everybody consider outside the village? And I think an answer to that, man, might be whatever the public was asked to, when you gave everybody those maps to say, like, put it in order of your preference, what area was designated? Because that's how people, that's what they were thinking when they said Washington Hollow
Right.
area outside the village.
Right, and we have those general areas, but for the overlay district, we're gonna need to have concrete boundaries to it. So there's
Exactly.
quite a,
Right.
there's, it's easy to put, a bubble around, an area and say, this is in general where the hospitality district, overlay district is gonna go. But then to fine tune that, you really have to look at the land uses, the environmental conditions, the infrastructure, or whatever else we need to look at to fine tune how far out, where the boundaries are going to go, and so forth. So that mapping of the two overlay districts is certainly the first task that we would need to tackle to get that done. I mean, so it could be that you already know and that you want to mark up a map and let me know. Or it could be that you kind of just generally know, we could give you like, here are the two areas. And you want us to kind of analyze the conditions and make a recommendation about how far out or where the boundaries might make a logical place to be. So I think that's the first decision point of how you want to approach that. Meanwhile, while there's discussions going on about the boundaries of the districts, we could begin working on implementing some of the things that are discussed in the hospitality report that are specific things that need to happen and be said about those overlay districts.
So I have a question. I know we're going to talk about other things at 7:00, and we're talking about overlay districts.
Yeah.
But we've been talking for years about changing the zoning in Washington Hollow, the general zoning, from residential to some sort of mixed use or hamlet mixed use, and how would that affect doing the overlay? If we change the zoning in Washington Hollow, like we've been talking about for years, because it's the commercial part of Washington Hollow, it has always been commercial for as long as I've been alive. Then if we do that, and we include hospitality as one of the allowed uses, then do we need to go through this exercise first and then that exercise second?
Well, do we need to create an overlay district if we change the zoning?
Right.
Do we need to even?
No, and that's my question.
Right.
I mean,
Nan,
we
do you
need to
have
address
thoughts about
the
that?
zoning in Washington Hollow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, it is a good point, and I think that you would first have to look at what the boundaries of that. Yeah, I guess I don't have the map in front of me, but is it a hamlet district that's already in Washington Hollow, or it's part of another broader district?
No, it's all residential.
Yeah,
But-
so
Yeah.
I think that it's much
So
the
it-
same. It's much the same exercise in that you still would need to determine the boundaries. If you wanted to create a district, call it an overlay district or a base district in Washington Hollow, we still have to find out what those boundaries are. So I think that it's a valid idea to, if you are, I mean, there's a couple different ways that could go. It could be an overlay district that allows hospitality, and all we address in that overlay district is hospitality. It could be a mixed use district that is an overlay district that establishes hospitality in these other mixed uses that you might want there. Or it could be you create a whole new base zoning district. The regulations will be, it's how we package them up.
Right, so we've talked about the boundaries being on the north side of 44 from the Pleasant Valley line. I guess the town line starts on this side of Copperfields, on the east side of Copperfields, all the way to the top of the hill to the Farm and Home Center, or to also include EIS, Institute Echo Systems property also. Whether that makes sense or not, I don't know, but we should probably get the Farm and Home Center in there. And I mean, I don't think there's any, there's no residents on that side of the road. There is 2 or 3 residents on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
And we could.
Now, here's a consideration. I don't mean to interrupt, but here's a consideration. You could have a hamlet boundary, call it Washington Hollow, and you may not want hospitality in the entire hamlet district. So it still may be useful to have a broader hamlet with an overlay district that just addresses hospitality. If you want to target the hospitality to a certain location in that broader hamlet district, if it's all one and the same, and that your hamlet, or whatever you want to call it, your Washington Hollow district, that is going to allow a variety of mixed uses, is one and the same, and it's exactly the same location that you want to allow for hospitality, then we can weave the hospitality rules into that district. But if they're 2 different locations, it still might be advantageous to target your hospitality to the hospitality overlay.
Nan, let me ask you a question. Along the geographic area that Bob is referring to, if you go further up past IES, there is a commercial entity called Orvis, which is sporting clays. They do fishing and so on in that area, along that same north part of what we used to call 44A, but it's now referred to by the state as a different road. Would you want to consider things that already exist along that route to bundle them into that, which means you could go up as far as an Orvis, or no?
Zoning, like that's going
The
to
thing about
include
Orvis,
things like that, right?
Orvis, though, I think it's because
Orvis
it's
is
shooting, Mike. I think that's why you're able to have that commercial entity there.
But is that defined as a hospitality type of entity under hospitality?
I don't think so.
No, I would not consider that's a retail. I mean, that's basically a retail use, even though they might do other things there.
But if they have acreage, would that, I'm speculating, would there be a time where they might say, let's build an inn for weekenders coming up, spending the weekend shooting, fishing, and so on, and therefore they'll be outside of that area?
I don't know. We have to go back to, remember, when we did the hospitality study, the community was quite focused on small areas that they wanted to allow and not have it spread out. I mean, I guess you could make a case for any parcel along that major road that, it would be a great place for a hotel. Let's bring in tourists. So spreading it out along the highway, I'd have to look at the map and see how close that is. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question right now without really studying the maps and the environmental conditions of that area and to see how far away it is from everything else.
If the demarcation then became IES, that gives us a fairly solid footprint of what to look at as far as the boundaries of that and what other ecological impacts are on that area. Because, those structures are already there. You basically draw a survey line around the whole thing and saying, here's the district.
Yeah, I would also think, and I don't know this, I would think that their property is in conservation.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I don't know why we'd want to even confuse it if it is conserved property that's being used for specific use. And the same thing with Orvis, although I think that's an interesting thought about if they'd want to have some sort, but isn't Canoe Hill Road in between that?
Yes.
See, I think those residents would be concerned about having that become a mixed use.
So if you jump in
commercial
front of
district.
IES, now you're getting down to Farm and Home Center, there's another structure that can start your border as far as a visual look.
Right.
Mary
I
had a
don't know
question.
why we need to even, like, Orvis and IES are going, they have no problem existing there, and we don't want to change that.
No,
And we don't
I'm
want-
saying that Jan was saying you need to start out by looking at what is your actual parameters of
Right.
what this area is going to be stamped
Yeah,
that.
but to have, like, say, an overlay, I don't know how far you want to go with zoning changes or how far up, but if we were just talking about an hospitality overlay district, I wouldn't even come up as far as Sharon Turnpike, and Farm and Home Center. Because you wouldn't want to have that property like the way it is now, you want to keep it the way it is.
Can I point out just two things? Looking at the zoning map and knowing the property, Orvis is directly across from the Village of Millbrook boundaries. So that would be something you would consider anyway in properties outside the Village of Millbrook. The other question is,
Good point.
yeah, one of the potential projects in the town, they too, I guess, would be considered outside the Village of Millbrook.
Right.
Because I'm looking at the 44 map, and do we go this far? Do you go this far to the traffic light?
But there's two
Mary,
separate
can
overlays.
would you
though.
mind if I photocopied that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just take it, because
I think it's
I'll
here.
make it for the.
it's in
Oh,
the pack.
it's in our
It's in the
pack?
pack.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Page
sorry.
4
Yeah.
in your pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that I would point out is that the comprehensive plan with the addenda that you just adopted called for creating a hospitality overlay district. That is a very targeted kind of thing. In terms of time frame, and I'm not saying you should make your decisions based on time frame, but to create an overlay district that says, these are the hospitality uses we're going to allow, these are the sizes, these are the development standards, whatever. These are the processes we're going to go through, is way more straightforward than creating a base district with a lot of mixed uses. You're going to have to create a whole new use table. You're going to have to look at all the standards for all of those uses. And I'm not saying that it's not necessarily a good idea to just make them all one, but I think to create a whole new mixed district is a different scope of work than creating an overlay district in terms of time and the thought and, to the amount of evaluation that you all would need. Well, what are the mixed uses that you want in? What are the sizes of all of those buildings? Do you want gas stations? Do you not want gas stations? I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that go into that. So I would say that might be one of the reasons why you start off with the overlay district. And at some point, if you want to create a mixed use district in Washington Hollow, you can mesh the overlay district back into it. But I just think that if you want something timely and get it done, I'm a little concerned that a mixed use district is not something so straightforward.
Okay, so I think my next question would be, if you do the overlay district and we take the old Cottonwood Inn and the Cottonwood Motel and we just make it those two spots as the overlay district, and then we change the whole north side of 44 up to the Farm and Home Center or EIS, and we take away the residential and we put a mixed use zone in, and we list what we'll allow and don't allow, then you wouldn't allow hospitality in that zone, in that mixed use zone? because it's already allowed in the overlay?
No, at that time, you certainly could change it if you wanted to allow hospitality uses everywhere in that mixed use zone.
So we can, so I
It
guess.
sounds like we're doing two different things.
Yeah.
We could do one thing.
Well, one
But except
thing,
that
we want to
process is
accomplish-
gonna
so
be
that the
longer.
process that is changing the zoning, first of all, would be longer, but it sort of goes out of the scope of what we're, like, this is hospitality
Yeah.
review.
Yeah.
So we're trying to stick to that main theme of trying to have hospitality like exist. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think
Do you-
because of the funding source, the funding is very specific to that, and so,
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue
Yeah.
with blocking out the overlay,
Right.
yeah,
but I don't want to forget that it's important for us
to
to
fix
look,
that,
to
yeah.
fix, you know.
Well, it makes
Right.
sense because right now, what's actually happening there is not what it's zoned for, and it should be, because that's what's happening there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
it's been
there's so
happening
many,
there for years.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's,
right.
it's all commercial, a lot of commercial entities are there and in a residential area. I have a question for you, Nan, about that. I mean, if we do say, okay, here's the line, and the line goes from the Farm and Home Center all the way up to Copperfields, is it, or past Copperfields? Isn't the gas station and the
No.
antique
No.
shop,
Copperfield's
they're
not.
not?
Copperfield's is.
Copperfields
Pleasant
is where the
Valley.
line is. So wouldn't we want to say that that whole area, I'm just throwing this out there as is hospitality? Because if we just outlined the Cottonwood, wouldn't that be considered, would that be considered spot zoning in a way?
It wouldn't, I mean, I think that,
Properties that would,
so the
Yeah.
short answer is no, that would not be considered spot zoning, because you can, when you have identified something like we've done in the comprehensive plan, and you say, you know, you want a very limited area to allow hospitality in, you've already basically said that's what you want to do. So it's not a spot zoning issue. I'm not sure it's advisable, though, to limit yourself to just 2 parcels. So
Right,
I
'cause
think that
what-
if you want to grow a little bit and you want to give yourself the opportunity to, you know, have more hospitality in that area, it might be advisable to make it more than just those 2 parcels.
right. And then what about the, where, is Dr. Strange the chiropractor? And the
Bob Campbell.
Yeah. Yeah.
that building, I
The
mean,
veterinary.
at some point, right now it's not, but that has parking and it's,
Mhm.
No, that would be.
that could be feasibly
absolutely.
something, so we could, I
And
mean,
we
that
could
whole
also make
area,
that
yeah,
hospitality too, because
Yeah.
if they've decided to change it
yeah,
years from now, be a good spot for it.
And
Yeah.
and the town boundary is slightly up off of 44 on South Road. It's
Yeah.
not contiguous, but it doesn't go straight
Straight
across the line.
across.
It kind of goes on an angle. So a little bit down South Road, almost to
what about
Back
the
of
antique, what about the
three pieces
antique
down.
store, or that, the
the little building
one,
across from the gas station.
yeah,
That's town of Washington.
that is, okay, so on the opposite side, it goes further down.
That's the south side.
Copperfields, okay.
Dan, going back to your original question of what are the logistics of getting this done and where the town is, I think you can tell we're pretty much starting at the beginning. Is this the right jumping point? Should we be starting with the overlay district, or did you have other recommendations on what we should?
Well, you know, I had not considered, nor had anyone really talked to me about creating a broader mixed use district. I agree, we don't want to do the same thing twice, but again, it's timing and consideration. And if what your goal is right now is to get the hospitality district in the 2 locations set with the rules that you want to have, I think that's just a more straightforward question than creating a whole district that's got a lot of other considerations that go with it. Could they be the same? Of course. It really depends on how comfortable you are, you know, taking what what it takes to create a whole new district, a whole new base district with lots of uses that might be in there. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I'm just saying that I'm not familiar enough with all of the ins and outs of what you had wanted, because I wasn't part of any of those discussions beyond the hospitality.
Yeah.
So I think that you fundamentally have to decide as a board, do you want to just tackle the hospitality overlay for now, or do you really want to do it all at once and create this whole new mixed district that doesn't answer the question about the second area outside the village that may or may not be an overlay district? So I don't know. I think you guys have to decide what the approach is. And that's why I started, with that question is, what do you want to tackle? There's a whole lot of things to tackle in the zoning beyond just the overlay districts. So I think what was that?
Go ahead. Part 2 of today's meeting is we're going to review what the planning board and the zoning board are giving us as recommendations to look at of experiences they've had over the last several years with problem areas. We haven't looked at those yet. So in their summaries, they may be referring to what Bobby has brought up, and that will help us. If it's cumbersome on them, it may help us make a decision to do a broader approach right now rather than limit it just to hospitality. But we can't answer that right now because we haven't looked at what those recommendations
So maybe that's what we should
do.
We
will by the end of this meeting be able to tell you. But right now, you're asking, do we do the hospitality first or do we go to a broader one? We have to wait to hear, and we're going to be looking at what planning and zoning is looking at as far as the problem areas they're facing. That may be a problem area that we all say after looking at it, it's more than just hospitality that's a problem down there. Let's address the whole thing.
I want to recommend, and this is just my opinion, you can take it for what it's worth, but I would suggest that we keep the hospitality portion of it, the overlay district portion of it, totally separate for 2 reasons. One, it will probably move along quicker than everything else we're going to be discussing later.
Yeah.
So if we want to meet our goals to move this along and have it done, within this year, I think it's the only way to do it, because if we lump the two together, we're going to be talking about this for a long time. And also, because we've been funded money specific to the hospitality, I think, we should, to keep it clean, continue with just the overlay district and then possibly fold the overlay district into the broader Washington Hollow expansion or Washington Hollow district.
I mean, the fact it doesn't limit us, that we can go back if
Yes,
we need
correct.
to, and we can just have that, because just having read some of the recommendations and know them from listening in on planning board meetings and CAC, there's a bunch of them, like if we look at that whole list, that are going to require a lot of conversation, and the ones people are going to want public input. What's great about this is we've already gone through the exercise of getting the public input, so we have a real roadmap. Some of those recommendations some of it's easy, it's language and stuff like that, but some of it is,
While
not.
we're talking about it,
Yeah, like
what other places do we have? We have the Daytop deal up there. If we want to include something in that area, Mabbittsville already allows motel, hotel type of thing in the mixed use zone. I think the only thing we have to address there, which we can do when we do all the other stuff, is the fact that the rule of having 25% more
Right.
residential,
Yeah.
50% more residential growth before you can have any commercial growth.
What
That's
about,
the issue there.
yeah,
So, that part is probably not going to be that complicated unless we want to change a few of the uses in that Hamlet mixed use. So really, what other places?
what's behind St. Joe's? Isn't is it Cardinal Hayes?
Yeah.
Cardinal Hayes, someone was saying to me that, and I forget who it was.
Well, that's Village.
That's not considered outside village.
No.
That's still village. Okay.
Still village.
Yeah, like St. Joseph's School that's empty.
Yeah.
Well, they're using it for some things, but that whole big property.
Yeah.
there is-
Outside
that's
village would be everything that runs along 44A. The Thorn property side is village, correct, right?
Almost all of it, I think.
All the way up Rodrigo, that whole area is village.
Rodrigo's town.
Rodrigo is town. So it kind of cuts in. So we really need to get
Yeah,
some definitive look at where all these boundaries are and then address this area down in Washington Hollow.
Well, there was that building over here, right by the circle. And Ann, you actually made a recommendation, didn't you, on what was just defined as
So
area
it's
outside
page
of the village?
17
Okay.
of this packet.
Okay.
It tells us outside the village
And that's where
and then
people-
adjacent to the village.
Where people, you
So
know,
it gives us an idea, and then it is recommended that the town implement these overlays in a phased approach.
right.
With
Okay.
an overlay first in the Washington Hollow area, followed by
oh, so
initiating
this is already,
coordination with the village of Millbrook. So it's just sort of broken down already.
oh, it is
Yeah.
broken
Okay.
down really closely. This,
I wanted to do that before.
did I interrupt? It's me. Oh, that's great, because you all probably gave that quite a bit of thought in your conversation, obviously, if it was
That's
summarized
how-
here. Yeah,
Right. So this is why we need to sort of do we
Really
want
use
to
this as
just
a guide.
go ahead with
Yeah.
using this as a guide and then making it happen?
I think that's a straightforward approach, and especially because this is now part of your comprehensive plan, these are kind of the directions that it sets you down. And it doesn't mean you can't change it in a year or two when you fix some of these other things, but I think that is, efficiently and politically, that's what you said you were going to do. We've already told the public that's what we're going to do.
Right.
and this doesn't include that parcel. The Daytop parcel
Yeah.
is within this
Yeah.
those lines.
So what I'm thinking, assuming that, there's agreement that we're going to follow this kind of phased approach, what probably would be helpful, you could either take one of the maps that you already have and mark it up with any ideas that you have for, using this as the guideline. And then we would look and make sure there aren't any environmental issues that would put a squash on having a hospitality use in that area. Get you a draft map to ponder and think about. And meanwhile, drafting the language for the overlay. So that is just like any other district. It would have purpose statements, or a statement. It would have a list of uses that are allowed. It would have a little dimensions table, that would give lot sizes or whatever other standards, dimensional standards we want to put in there. And then it would have the development standards and requirements for hospitality, those uses in that district. So it would be, a self-contained chapter. We'd have to fit it in with the numbering system of the zoning, just like you have now. You have the environmental overlay and you have the watershed. I forget there's another one as well. But so it would be fit into the zoning, and you would then adopt this as like you have other zoning changes in the past. It would be a local law. It would be written as a local law. You would have to have the public hearing and the county planning board review, and the seeker would have to be done on it before you can adopt it. But I think that you would then, I could draft something for you as a starting place. And then I think your discussion would fine tune it to, because you're always going to know the town better than me and what you want and what you have. So I can give you the language as a starting place, and organize it in the way it needs to be organized. And then you'll have to schedule time to discuss those and finesse them.
I think that's great.
Right.
Makes great
But
sense.
like, do we want to each take a map and look at it and think about?
Well, if we use this as a guide,
Yeah.
I mean, even with my readers, the other map's a little small
Yeah.
for me, so I can't
Right.
figure out where I am, but I can't see it so
I can
well, but
send
yeah, we
you-
can certainly,
I can send you a blank map or, some other map that is just that area, that you can scribble on, and everyone can, take a look at it and drive around and draw some lines, and we'll see if we can come up with some consensus about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking out loud to myself that, has anybody ever talked to the Institute people over there about the old Gifford House that just sits empty now for years? It's just sitting on 44A, big brick house, so maybe we should include some of that corridor in there, because in the future, that would make a nice little,
is that part of,
it's part of Institute
yeah.
Ecosystems.
and I think all
They used
the,
to have offices
Yeah.
in there years and years ago, but they just shut it down.
yeah,
I like what Nan suggested,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah,
I do.
Do that. and
Yeah.
If you read this like you were
Yeah.
going to, but
yeah.
Yeah.
it really details in words what a border would look like, but I
Yeah.
think we gotta physically look at what that would really look like.
Yeah.
And then
The same way over here, they talked about parcels without significant environmental along the village 343 that may be possible locations for a next to the village overlay district. And those are already delineated
Yeah.
out in words, but I think we got to visually see
Visualize
those
it.
and
Yeah.
visit some of the places.
Yeah.
Because there are some implications
Yeah.
on wetlands.
And what do you mean
restrictions
by
and stuff.
just outside the village?
Right.
Right,
It's
is it
just
one
outline-
parcel, or do you go,
Yeah, that's what you have to
several
look at.
parcels back, or? Yeah.
And I think that's where the decision is. We didn't get that fine, deeper, we didn't do
Yeah,
that
get that
deep
deep.
dive. So I think you have those decisions to make.
and in the meantime, Nan, the rest of it, you think you could give us some language to look at to get that process started?
Mhm.
And then once we agree to the lines and we agree to the language, then it would be that the steps would be a public hearing, right? And then, right? So it might be a 4-month process or less.
Yeah, there's one extra
Right?
step that goes in there. I'm pretty sure your zoning requires zoning changes to go to be reviewed by the planning board. So I think they have to
Yeah.
give an
Oh, right.
advisory opinion.
Okay.
So you have to
just I
build in
wanna make
time
sure,
you could do multiple things at once. You can be doing a public hearing while the planning board is reviewing it. Yeah, it really should be, because the county planning board is supposed to be notified about it 10 days before your public hearing. So, I would say the planning, as soon as you're ready, the first step would be to get the planning board's advisory opinion. And I'll look it up in the zoning, but most zoning laws require the planning board to have an advisory opinion.
Okay.
All right.
Nan, as part of what you're doing, or would that include these other items, other priority recommendations? Or are you thinking you're working specifically on the overlay district and the overlay language? But the other recommendations include things as define necessary terminology, limit inns to 20 rooms, but consider options to fine tune the density. So are you doing all of this, or are we talking doing
The overlay.
specifics to overlay?
Well, it would be those things in the overlay district because the hospitality wouldn't be allowed anywhere else. So we would use those. I mean, some of those would be able to be incorporated as the standards within the overlay. I mean, there are some other things in this list, such as developing short-term rental regulations that is more than just the overlay. So there's certainly things on this list that have a broader scope. And then that's for you, again, that's for you all to decide if you want me to work on those as well. So, you know, some of them certainly can be, you know, like for instance, prohibit commercial campgrounds, glamping operations in RV parks. Well, that's a change to the use schedule in the rest of the zoning. It's not necessarily an overlay district thing. So you all have to decide whether you want to tackle those things now on the broader zoning scale. I mean, I certainly could. I think that's what I was thinking of when we started this, but that's totally up to you.
But Nan, if it's interesting. You think that we should be very explicit about the fact that we don't allow that in the zoning? Because right now there's probably nothing about it in the zoning.
There's nothing.
So do you see what I'm saying? If there's nothing in the zoning that says that it's allowed, isn't the presumption that it's not allowed? Because if they were to go before any of our boards, they wouldn't be approved because the boards don't have any kind of a law to guide them, right?
Right.
I don't know.
That is, you know, that is the presumption. On the other hand, is that we often have situations where people make the case, oh, you just never thought of it. You know, the zoning was written 10 years ago before glamping was even an issue. And so I guess I'm pretty conservative in my approach, in that if you really want to prohibit something, you should say you're prohibiting it. And then it puts the question to bed.
Okay.
Right, because we do allow.
We prohibit it. But that's, yeah. Nan, just to let you know, there's been a subcommittee here in town before this hospitality issue came up that has been working on addressing the short-term rental issues because it became a county issue, it's a state issue. We've been doing a lot of research and we put together a committee. We have finished a draft local law which has gone through review by the committee, by attorneys. That committee is going to be presenting it to the full board next month. Within that document, we get into the restrictions on glamping, camping, all of that within that law, which is specific to short-term rentals, but there's nothing to say some of that can't be pulled out into a broader concept of the hospital, because that's falling under hospitality. So we are incorporating that into our local law.
Okay,
so that piece has been done.
Okay, great. That's terrific. Yeah. So I guess, Mary, in answer to your question, I think a lot of the things that are talked about related to hospitality will become the standards in the overlay districts. But, you know, there were some other things that we pointed out that, you know, like, I know you're working on the natural resource inventory. I'm just looking at the list. You know, like, here's one that's really coordinate the aquifer protection area between the town and the village by adopting the same aquifer protection map. That's really, you know, it came up because we noticed it and it was a contradiction, but it's not necessarily an overlay issue. You have to decide whether you want to do that now or later.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I did on that particular issue, I was at a training on Friday. It was a 3-part training for the Fishkill watershed with Pace Land Use Law Center, and that is a recommendation that they do make, and I know the village has its own jurisdiction over the aquifer, but what they're doing now is towns are looking at all of the effect, the runoff effect from everything that's around it that feeds into the aquifer, which the NRI maps will, Cornell was there, the DLC was there, it was so it was interesting, looking at that. And I made a note to myself, that's something that the village, we might want to work with the village on, just identifying those areas. Because they used a bunch of examples of when that can be problematic.
Right.
And it's something that.
And what's important is right now, you have watershed rules and regulations for the watershed in your zoning, and your map, in the village map, and the county map are different.
I know. Well, we're fixing that now.
That's what we need to, we need to coordinate them all, because it's all just one resource. It should be the same map with the same regulations.
That's what's happening right now with Cornell, and the DEC is working with Clinton and the village and us to do that.
So I kind of went through this quickly, and the summary is what I'm talking about. So I'm thinking if the board is in agreement, Nan would work on the following, and then the others we would do as our next hour, meeting part of the next hour. Define the necessary terminology regarding different hospitality uses, including inns and short-term rentals. I think you have definitions on your own, Mike, for short-term rentals.
Yep,
so we would want including inns. Create hospitality overlay districts which permit the inns. So we're in agreement on that. Mm-hmm. Limit inns to 20 rooms, but consider options to fine-tune the density by location or offering density bonus to incentivize inns that provide for additional amenities desired by the community. Is that something that Nan should be working on as part of the overlay?
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
It would be page 18.
Okay.
Well, I can put this up if you like. I don't know if you'll be able to read it.
They have it in front of them.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you wanted to have Nan come up with some ideas for, or if you wanted strictly 20 rooms, or if you talked about some lead environmental bonuses and some other bonuses.
Yeah, I think that we want flexibility.
Right. That's the clause.
Yeah, and I think.
I would see that as part of the overlay district.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And then also going down towards the bottom, as Nan said, prohibit commercial campgrounds, glamping, and RV parks.
Mm-hmm.
Would be something that we would also say. And then this is up to the board if you wanted to encourage adaptive reuse of existing structures in lieu of new construction. Mm-hmm. If you want that in the overlay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then if we come up with anything different on this list, I've kind of red dotted the items that we'll be doing in the second part of the meeting. Mm-hmm. But if you see something that you want Nan to work on, we could get back to Nan and let her know that we want those included in what she's working on.
I mean, to me, as far as sorry, Nan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the one where it says define hospitality uses and hospitality accessory uses, which may be allowed by right or by special permit. That's also something that would be addressed in the overlay.
That would be page 9.
And I think that the other one that the overlay would also have architectural and site design standards to make sure that whatever is in the overlay is done the way you expect it to be. So there is some other small things that would pop into the overlay district.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I think you hit the most of them.
Okay, so we're adding the ones from page 19. And the Mabbittsville, did you want to have Nan talk about that with the overlay, or do we want to go back to that.
Well, we have hospitality as an allowed use in Mabbittsville now.
Right.
So,
Except for the restriction that there can't be any more commercial growth because of the 2 times residential growth.
Right, so that,
So that should be probably worked on our,
on our
yeah,
part
so
two.
we can't,
Part two.
we can't include that in the overlay. We can't
Right.
do
Right,
that.
okay,
I wouldn't think we would need to.
Yeah, exactly.
okay,
Yeah, I don't think that's an overlay issue.
no, okay. And I think the board is all in agreement that you're continuing the rules for the use of the operation of the bed and breakfast. I think that's not anything that we need to do, it's just, yes, that we are
Reaffirm that.
affirming that, yeah.
And so is our mindset that we would not allow hospitality anywhere except for in the overlay districts?
Well, and in Mabbittsville where it's already allowed.
Right.
But what if there
So
is,
where else? It's
for instance, what if there are hypothetically existing structures within the town outside of these overlay districts that are amenable to a hospitality structure? There's no building, it's just remodeling and so on. I'm thinking of one along 44 right now. And that's outside the district. Would that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, a policy decision, but the hospitality study basically said limit your hospitality to those 2 areas, including Mabbittsville. So it would be Mabbittsville and then the 2 overlay district areas. So if there's something out in the upper part of town that could be adaptively reused, not for hospitality. Otherwise, how do you control it then? Then you can have anyone, then you back to kind of where you were now with allowing hospitality uses in any house or any barn to be rehabbed into hospitality.
So along 44 and 343, just outside the village, that becomes a kind of a ambiguous term, I would guess.
Well, that's why
That's why we're setting it.
But you're defining Washington Hollow and you're defining perhaps Mabbittsville. In here, they said perhaps along where the monument is out across from Bennett.
Yes,
But those are all perhaps.
that's another,
That's what we
that's
have to-
another
So you'll have to
overlay.
carve them out and make them
Yes.
more over.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes,
I
that would
think-
be, yes, so that would be fine, so if that's why we would create the Washington Hollow overlay, and then the second overlay with, the guidance from the words that we've included in the report, fine-tuned through your discussions as to where that
So
would
you
be.
You don't bundle these and do them all together. You look at each area separately and
No,
have a
it'd be one
separate
map. It
process.
would be one
Or
overlay.
can you bundle them?
You would,
Would be
they would most likely have the same regulations, but it'd be, think of, color it red or color it whatever, hatched area. And there's an overlay in Washington Hollow, and then there's an overlay further up 44. They would follow the same requirements and the same rules. So they would be done concurrently as part of our process, just different locations.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So Nan, you'll send me a map that I can provide to them?
Yes.
To go ahead and, okay,
Mhm.
All right, good.
yeah.
And then she'll come up with the language and then that's it, okay? So.
Yeah, so I will get Rick working on a cleaner map that might be easier for you to just doodle, draw some lines. And we will also, when we get those, we'll just double check and make sure there aren't any other significant environmental issues that we wanna pay attention to. And I'll start working on what these overlays would include in them. And like I said, and then we'll have to have discussions and go paragraph by paragraph until you feel they're right.
Okay.
Great.
I have a quick question now that's one of the recommendations, but it's not directly related to a hospitality overlay, but you say create a current environmental protection or activate a current environmental protection overlay. Did the committee have something specific in mind there, or what?
I don't, well, the issue is that you have a very good section in your zoning for an environmental overlay district, but it was never mapped. So it's just words on a piece of paper. So you want to put that overlay to work by having it mapped. And so I think your NRI would ultimately result in the identification of what would be included in that environmental overlay.
Okay, so right now it's words in our code, but it's not mapped.
Right. So it specifically says this overlay only has authority and jurisdiction if there's a map. And since you don't have a map, it's just a nothing.
Interesting. Okay. I wonder, I mean, I'm sure Margaret Schneibel, who's on the NRI committee, I mean, if she were here right now, she could, well, we have Howard here too, also who's knows the code very well, but she'd probably know exactly what specifically the areas that you're referring. I just didn't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I think that typically what we do is we look at all of the environmental resources and I don't know whether your NRI will go this far, but we generally then look at, I mean, we kind of did this in the hospitality study where we looked at the overlap of all of the natural resources. And you decide, you know, where are the sensitive locations that need to have those rules applied to them to be extra development standards to protect those areas. So in a way, we kind of have that done, but I think that it's, you know, going to be the NRI mapping will fine tune that more. So that's really just a matter of, that would be its own process that, I forget, do you guys have a CAC?
Yeah.
So that would be an ideal assignment for the CAC to look at what we did and the NRI maps and start working on what would be included in an environmental overlay.
They have, so the CAC has been, I sort of asked Margaret, we charge them, actually it's one of their, you know, one of their areas of jurisdiction, if you will, for their work is to actually keep our maps updated, look at our maps. So I asked them to look at all the maps that you did, along with the maps that Cornell has and the county has, just to see, you know, to make sure they're doing that with, you know, the village and with Clinton too. So that's great. I'll mention that to them.
Okay.
Nan, one more question pertaining to the addendum and the maps that are in the addendum to the comp plan that we adopted. Do you have the ability to print those for us, or should I just be taking them to a local map place? Either
way, you know, yeah, whatever you like, we can get them printed for you and charge, you know, put it in our bill, or you can have, you know, do it at your local printer, whatever way you would like.
I think I'll have you print them if you don't mind, and I'll get you the sizes and stuff that we'll need.
Okay, yeah, just go through and identify if you want them all or if you want certain ones and what size. We can arrange to have them printed. They can be laminated, whatever you like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I make a suggestion for her? Is it possible then to get the GIS layers of all of the different maps that you put together in your base map, so that the board can hire somebody if they wanted to just print particular parts of that map?
Oh yeah, I mean, the shape files are our policy as consultants is that we created that data for you. Those are your shape files. I can give you the shape files. If you have someone that has the software that can use those shape files. Yeah, so what was that?
All
right, thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Okay, so Nan's not staying for the second part, right?
No.
So I think we're finished with this part, right?
Yeah.
We're all in agreement.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Nan.
Nan, thank you very much.
Good. All right, very good. Then first thing up, I'll work on a little base map for you to doodle on, and we'll start from there.
All right, lovely.
Nan, one
Thank
other
you.
quick question. What
Yes.
do you think the timeline is in getting us a draft of language for the overlay?
Well, I'm booked this week, but I will put it on my to-do list to start on next week. I think from my experience, the time frame is not me, but it's really how much time you all need to kind of absorb it and decide what's right. So, I could say I can get it to you in 2 or 3 weeks, but you might take 4 months to go line by line and feel comfortable with it.
Right. No, I just didn't know. It'd be
Well,
great to have a
it comes to
draft that we
public
could
hearing.
discuss,
That
the
might be
board
more
could
fun.
discuss or make comments to, or then discuss
Yeah.
maybe at our June meeting as at least a first pass. As I just didn't know if you thought you could have a draft to us.
When is your June meeting?
It's June 12th, maybe?
I'm looking.
Second,
June
third.
8th.
Oh, it's
Okay.
early.
Yeah, I don't think I can have anything ready for you June 8th, but maybe by the end of June.
That's okay.
Okay, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
We have to, we'll call a special meeting.
Yeah.
But I will jump in and I will keep you posted on my progress.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
All right. Very good. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, oh, it's
Roots
great.
and all
It's
that,
it's
so.
You
terrific.
have
Thank
to
you.
find that.
That's what I'm giving you.
Oh,
But you
really?
don't have
I
to
think it's the
kind of
same.
reinvent the
I
wheel,
hope it's
but
the same as
honestly,
what you
I had it pick mine.
thought it was.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
So we have a lot to kind of go over for the second part. We have zoning suggestions coming from different locations. So Leslie had an idea, or sent all of us an idea, and I think it's a good one. And I put them on the table. Leslie, if you want to
Oh,
pass it around. If each of you want to take 2 of them.
2?
Yeah. And basically what it will do is the different actions that we want to discuss, we could write them in the center column. Then we can decide if they're high priority, medium priority, low priority. Is it a short term?
Missing one.
Missing one? Okay, here you go. Mid-range or long term?
You took one.
Who will take the lead on it? Is it something that a board member wants to work with committee or planning board, ZBA? And then, is it input from a planning board, AKRF, town attorney, or is it something simple that the board can do? So as you're talking about different topics, if you just want to jot notes on that sheet, I can collect them and then put all your notes together. And then we can kind of figure out how we want to.
Do we have the
Proceed.
list from planning and zoning?
Yeah.
You were all sent the list, I believe, a while back, but I have one copy of it here.
Okay,
Even tonight that you
yeah, I
can,
remember getting it, but I don't have it.
I can give it to you if someone wants to just kind of be the coordinator and
Yeah,
read through it all and,
I can do that.
okay. I just gotta find it in my sections that I copied today.
these are from a long time ago.
Yes, sir.
We keep talking about it, and we never acted on it.
Yep.
Is it possible for you to send an email? Myself very clear on? Yeah, well, I heard the board, you don't think you all got it either, so I will send that to everybody. Okay. Yeah. I'll send it to everyone who's here tonight. And
The watershed protection, that's part of what was recommended there, and they.
Yeah, this is an old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Neil Wilson was our advisor to the planning and zoning.
Okay.
So do you want to, I'm going to give this to you, Leslie, because you've been
Sure.
through this quite a few times, probably with the planning board and stuff.
It printed super large, so each one is like 4 pages of
Okay.
information. The first one, for example, is the ZBA application form. I've already made those corrections. So probably.
Yeah, some of the housekeeping ones we can probably just check and just
check.
know that we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And it's just more the ones like,
So I'll put them in order, but if you want to, I don't know, Bob, if you want to start with the recommendations from Neil.
Well, yeah, 8 years ago, our guy that helped us with zoning and planning came up with four things that we should consider updating our zoning on. One was cell towers. Recommend a moratorium on development of new facilities to allow time to consider code updates relative of new technologies, meaning the little repeaters and things like that. But we've never acted on any cell phone or any cell tower legislation. So that might be one small item we'd want to put on our list. Steep slopes, and you can read that part.
steep slopes is also on the planning board's list too, so that's
Yes,
an easy one,
right.
yeah.
Right. And then, of course, water supply protection, that's on their list also, correct?
Yeah,
Right. And then land use, recommend a review of permitted and specially permitted uses for each of the zoning districts. The list of uses was last revised in '87 and probably needed an update. Pardon me?
It's based on a list earlier than that to a large extent of
Right.
district
Yep.
and
Right. And home occupations, recommend review of the list of permitted occupations, and the Mappsville Hamlet, whether
So,
the formula for limiting the expansion of commercial development in the hamlet is still relevant or should be replaced. And these were all something we've discussed
yep,
several times over the last 8 years, but never acted on any of them. So now that we're going to do some zoning changes, we should act on all those.
should I?
I mean, I don't think any of them were super difficult items, but
steep slopes, is there
There's
an
no,
example on?
there's no clear definition of steep slopes currently, but I think that the definition of quote buildable land says slopes less than 20% are to be excluded. Cluster subdivision regulations say less than 15%. So I wonder, I don't know, but that might be something we could
we have to do a little research.
research.
Yeah.
And AKRF, I'm sure, can give us some guidance on that. Should I take it from the top? Should I take it from the top? I'll read them out loud, and then we can add Steve Wilson's to the end if they're not already on the list. Does that make?
Yeah.
So ZBA application form, Mary, we've done that, right? We're
Yes.
working on that.
These are the next.
The application forms, Susan Meany's been doing that.
Yes.
Special permit review, that I think we can do, we can actually even put that task back to the planning and zoning board. It said it'd be helpful to have a list or chart of which special permits require granting by ZBA versus planning board.
Oh,
So
okay.
that would be something that,
It's an in-house, not a zoning change.
yes, okay. That's a great way to put it. Okay, so we're not
So
gonna,
I'll keep that on a separate.
okay. What is APO? APO overlay applicability indicates that the APO applies to the HM zone, but section 3152 says that the APO cover only, okay, so this looks like this is something that we need to do, but it's more of a language correction, not something that has to do with changing the spirit of something. It's just that there's inconsistency between the different sections. 5, site plan and other requirements for special permits waiver. It's unclear whether the ZBA or the planning board can waive site plan requirement for special permits on a case-by-case basis, or if the board must promulgate, oh my gosh, generally applicable rules as to which requirements can be omitted for certain types of special permit applications. That's something we need to discuss. And I'd probably want to ask AKRF and Jeff about that. Non-conforming structures and uses, expansion of non-conforming uses. Code says 25% of what exists in 1971, but what if the structure was built after that year? Does this section apply at all? Or does it, or if it does apply, then is it 25% of the structure at the time of the application or at the time of construction? In general, this entire section requires a broader look. So that's definitely one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That is a big one.
Yeah.
Unclear where section 391 is meant to apply only to non-conforming uses, buildings, and structures, or if it should also apply to non-conformities.
What section is that?
That is section 391. The text of the section uses these terms interchangeably, but they have different definitions. Per the zoning code definitions, the difference between non-conformity and non-conforming structure is in the timing of when the structure became non-conforming. A non-conformity lawfully existed before adoption of the law, grandfathered in, and a non-conforming structure became so after adoption via a variance. Per the legal memo from Vanderwater, section 391 does not apply to non-conformities. So
that's a language change.
That's language, have the language be consistent because it isn't, and so it's up to interpretation. Steep slopes, we have to provide a definition. We talked about that. Parking for educational facilities, no clear definition of what an adult student seat is.
An
what that
adult
is.
student seat.
We're going to find
What
out.
the heck is
In
that?
zoning code appendix C, off-street parking schedule, there's a requirement listed for an educational institution as one space for each employee plus one space for every 4 adult student seats. Definition section does not define what an adult student seat is. Its ratio seems low given the rural nature of the town. It seems to allude to carpooling of students being common. I don't know.
Adult student would maybe be a driver, I would imagine. So
yeah, or would it mean a kid at the high school that's
driving
above 18, right? 18 or above?
Or 16.
Okay.
It's definitely a definition.
Yeah, it's, we don't know. Like the fact we're even discussing it means we need to, clarify it. Maps that are posted on town's website are either outdated or not complete set. We're working on that. Land conservation zoning district superseded. Code should be updated to reflect wetlands law superseding LC district. LC district references should be removed throughout. Land conservation. Okay, so this looks like it's not, the wetlands law is not referenced throughout the code, is like what I think they're saying here. So we need to clarify that. That is fine. Is it just these 11? No.
And then there was
It's
one of
just, Mary just made
Oh,
copies of
okay.
this.
Oh, great. Okay, sorry.
That's a little confusing the way they're
Well,
stacked.
because I think
Yeah.
it's based on
There's a longer
which,
sheet of paper. right
which,
there.
yes, okay,
Parallel
here we
one
go.
another, yeah.
1 second, here we go, okay. Planning board's option to require a cluster plan on subdivision, criteria for cluster preference. May be helpful to have the criteria for a cluster preference be specific to subdivisions where development is being proposed simultaneously with the subdivision. Recent example, the Johnson family subdivision met some of the criteria due to size and constraints present. But since there were no plans for any construction, there was some confusion regarding the planning board's option to require a cluster plan, analyze buildability of the lots. Interesting.
Well, cluster means if you're in 5-acre zoning and you have 50 acres and you don't want to put a house on every allowable lot.
Right.
You cluster them and leave a lot of open space, right?
Exactly.
So they want a rule about it?
I don't know if that, I guess we could discuss that or look into that more specifically. I mean, with the Johnson piece, for example.
See, what happened is they subdivided that, but they never gave the intentions of why they were subdividing.
Well, they were subdividing
Do you know
it
what I mean?
because of the estate, so they wanted to be able to say, you own this, and I don't know whoever's inheriting what is going to decide what they want to do with it. And then thought was then they come before the planning board with their plans.
But the smallest lot was like
50 acres or something.
24 acres.
Yeah, or something like that. They're mostly big, 100-acre lots. So I don't, it was obviously totally legal what they did, and
No, right. But there's still, it's still being questioned.
Yeah.
As far as, okay, you subdivide it like several hundred acres into smaller parcels, and then, okay, then what's the future of each parcel? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really, I think they're trying to eliminate some of the mystery. Feeling that?
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, I would love to find out what, like, is there a recommendation from AKRF on this, or Jeff, or?
If you flip through that little packet that you,
That little packet
that
that you
accompanied
just
it,
had.
it will tell you who made the recommendation.
Oh, I see. Oh, great.
Over there. No,
CM, at the top. Insured, ZDA.
There was a sheet that says AKRF, I saw that,
I wonder if that's them
with the
here.
papers I
I
just
think
gave
this
you.
is them. So this is
Yeah, right
AKRF.
here.
That's
Right.
their, so I would just be curious to ask.
How often does that come up?
It doesn't really come up. And the other thing it's
I think it just came up now because it was.
Right.
done,
because
yeah.
of the
Well,
Johnson.
it has come up in the past.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Cynthia Cogswell,
Yeah,
when the
And,
subdivided, we're thinking about cluster zoning.
yeah, and, when it has come up the few times I've sat in on a few of those things, the problem is that, the people that are against clustering are the ones that are close to the cluster.
Well,
Right.
And, the
Right.
people that are on the open end of it, they're not complaining at all. So that's, maybe they want a little, but how do you do that with it? Because each case is gonna be a
Yeah,
little
and I just think
different.
having, apparently 10-acre zoning is
But you-
the broadest, I mean, the most rural and broadest zoning you can possibly have. And so, no, you can't
I
actually.
mean,
You
you
can't
can't blame
do
the
20.
people that live next to,
Um,
adjacent to it. They've always been.
That's what I was
used to
told
hundreds
directly
of
by
acres,
John
and
Dyson.
now
I
all
guess
of a
it's
sudden
where they
they
dragged it. You cannot do
500
20.
houses can go up.
Because there's a
But-
case for it being too onerous, I guess.
The only way to solve that is for you to buy it
So,
and not develop it.
Fine.
But I
yeah,
mean, you can't tell people what they can do on their land that's allowable uses.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, you have to think about that when you buy your house on Mabbittsville Road,
Were they
next to
looking-
the Johnson.
Do you think they were looking for
empty space.
a clear definition of what clustering is, the number that would
No, I don't think it's
constitute
the
a cluster?
number. I think it's they wanted a direction on how much can you cluster, like some sort of a chart.
yeah,
You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, okay.
do you need, if you have 50 acres and 10 acre zoning,
Right.
can you cluster them all on?
One
on
10-acre
on
zone.
one 10 acre
Yeah.
and leave the rest open? Or
Right.
do you need to use 50%,
Hmm.
maybe? I think that's what they're looking for.
Okay.
So
I think
maybe-
Size guidelines are already in the code, how much the acreage you would have to have for each lot versus the total amount. So there's a formula for it.
yeah.
But I think that what they're curious about, if I may speak,
Yeah.
is it mandatory to cluster or not? I mean, the people, we don't know, do people have to cluster if they're on large lots, or is it something the applicant decides?
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you're in 10-acre zoning,
That might be what they're
Yeah.
looking for.
Yes, no, yeah. Is it,
Richard.
do we have to, do
Right.
we tell people if they want to subdivide, you have to cluster zone?
Right.
Or do we,
You can't do
To
that.
I'll
protect
leave it up to the applicant.
protect the hillside or a
Right.
view shed or.
yeah.
Okay.
You know what I think is, what if we keep going through these, and then we'll quickly go through them at the end and say who wants to.
Right.
Then one of us can follow up with Aaron and ask, what were you thinking? We can get more
Yes.
information to take it to the next
Yeah.
level and do the assignments on it. Because that might be what they're looking for, or they might be wanting us to discuss whether it makes sense to have it or not. Okay, general process to follow for subdivisions that don't contemplate construction of roads or houses at the time of application. Again, going back to Johnson, I think. For applications involving subdivision of land for purposes other than construction, estate distribution of assets, sale to conservation group, et cetera,
Right.
it may be
Exactly.
useful to have a separate section that outlines a distinct, simplified process that allows for certain provisions to be waived. Could ask him what he meant by that. Farming worker housing review process. Zoning code requirements for farm worker housing may be unreasonably restrictive under New York agricultural law. Particular issues requiring a formal recent survey and requiring a special permit, which requires a site plan and public hearing. We've had that.
That's what
Just
the
recently.
winery.
Yeah. It was a barn, right? They were
Yeah,
going to
barn
put an
was-
apartment,
I already had an apartment in it, and they wanted to make two apartments.
two
in it.
apartments
And
for
because it
farm
was for farm
workers.
workers, it was not considered mandatory that we look at it as an accessory structure.
Right.
So we granted it
Okay.
because of farm agricultural use.
So per Department of Agricultural guidelines, the local review process should generally not require professional assistants, architects, engineers, or surveyors. That's what they're talking about, the cost of them having to come in to go through all that to do that. Consider easing the requirements for review and approval. Okay. Farming definitions, the New York State definition of a farm is broader than the town's definition, which may render the town definition unreasonably restrictive. The narrower town definition has the effect of excluding certain types of farms from the greater protections that the state laws intend to provide. You know, this I think could be tricky because I do think that, I don't know, people might say, I have a farm because I grow an acre of flowers and, you know, and then we have I don't know.
Commercial
I don't
farm.
know.
Mhm.
But the state can answer that definition, and ours doesn't correlate to them. Ours may be too strict.
I don't know. I don't know if we're allowed, if municipalities are allowed to make it more specific and more restrictive, and the state can just provide broad guidelines. I don't know if the state,
So the state definition and then the town, are we more restrictive?
we're more restrictive.
And so are they wondering?
So they're wondering,
Are we in violation of?
I'm
I
sorry,
think that could
are we
exclude
able to
certain
override the
Right.
state definition?
so it says per depth of agricultural guidelines, if the municipal definition does not encompass breadth of crops, livestock products, and farmer enterprises identified in the AML, the local law may be deemed to be unreasonably restrictive and a violation of AML. Example, Town of Washington definition expressly excludes raising of fur-bearing animals, livery or boarding stables, and pig farms. I have 2 pigs. Whereas the New York State definition expressly includes farming of hogs, fur-bearing animals, and commercial horse boarding operations. So we should look at that. That's a Jeff question, I think.
Yes, it was.
Section 335 on erosion and sediment control requires such a plan for new subdivision plan approval, but not for new construction of a single-family home that is not part of a new subdivision. Should add a requirement for that in all construction. Also typo. This seems like this is just an easy fix because it's just not as comprehensive as it should be. Section 334A, confusing as to what is a private road versus a common driveway. They said to clarify that. Telecom facilities, do we need to update the outdated 1998 definition used for personal wireless radio television comm facilities? Also, are the application requirements outdated?
Technology may solve that question. Advances in
APO
technology.
districts use a 1989 map. So we need to, the map will fix that. I'm gonna, we can fix that. Need a procedure for farm housing applications. Environmental preservation districts, which we just talked about, which will get out really from the NRI, just to know wherever that's what the best practice is with the watersheds, is that they look to see where any runoff would go into the aquifer, not just the aquifer itself. I can bring my, did I send you all my slides? I'm going to send everybody my slides, and I'll bring my plaque in that I got. And Margaret got a plaque too, but I have to bring the plaque for her.
Oh, we'll hang it on the
Oh, we've got our picture, and I mean, it's engraved with our names on it.
Utensils part of it?
I mean, you can't even imagine.
Right, put it on the wall.
On your fireplace.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I have it in the kitchen right now. I mean, who knew? Section 4D typo, so that's an easy fix. Corrections of various typos in the table of contents, so I can fix that. R10 and RS10 are mislabeled in the legend for the town zoning map. I can fix that when we're doing the NRI maps. Amend wetlands law to reduce number of copies required from original +8 to require an application form and number as required by the planning board. We did that. Right, Mary, we reduced that already, but I don't know if we need to just reduce
I don't know
it
if
in
we
the
did it for
code.
wetlands. I know we've done it for planning board.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay. That's an easy fix, though. Amend subdivision regulations to change the number of copies required for an application. This is not, though, that's not requiring any kind of code change. That's right?
It
That's-
might be in the code. So
It-
we'll have to
okay,
look.
okay. These are easy fix, okay. Amend site plan application requirements for copy, it's easy fix.
Yeah.
Amend wetlands law to reduce confusion as to what type of wetland delineation is required for an initial application. Subsection 5 says that a formal wetland delineation is not required for every application. Section 11 says that the board can require a formal delineation, yet uses language that makes it sound required. How to determine when it's required is unclear. This is from Susan Meany. So, okay.
Or when to use a wetland delineation map or
It's, so right now, section 5 says that a formal wetland delineation is not required for every application,
but it
but a
doesn't,
different section says that the board can require a formal delineation. So it's just not consistent. It says in section 11 makes it sound like it's required when section 5 says that it's not required. So she needs to determine which way to go because it's unclear. I ask them, this is some ZBA things. General, we're writing a wetlands law, which is confusing. It's kind of a big one. I need a little more detail in a second. That's all that we have from the ZBA on it. Add new section 349, solar energy and wind energy systems to the online and printed zoning code. Amend the solar law to beef up the requirement to shield the panels from view. Definitions. The definition of a structure is causing some issues in terms of lot coverage calculations. The way a structure is defined currently means that a driveway attached to the ground meets the definition. They would like to see the definition be less broad. Currently, a structure is any building or thing constructed or erected on the ground or by attachment to something on the ground. Section 331, signs. John Parisi said he has raised the issue in the past of prohibiting LED lighting on signs. He asked that this be considered. Okay.
the village has no LED, we don't.
Yeah,
I think that came up in the gas station.
yeah, the gas station is
We changed
not
that.
in compliance and it's bad. I mean, it's a
This
bummer.
gas station in the village?
The gas
No,
station in
Oh, in
Mabbittsville.
Mabbittsville.
And I think what happened is the man bought it and it was already there and he didn't have he wasn't able to afford to replace it.
There's
And
plenty of
so
signage
he's
there.
supposed to, this is, I don't think currently the changes that, I think he might need to, James might want to swing by and just, because I do think it's tuned up to a level that was not agreed upon from, were you on the planning board then, Richard? No.
I was.
remember.
Remember that?
I remember
Yeah.
the whole
I was
bloody
there.
everything.
Um,
And
'cause-
he's restricted to a certain LED requirement.
Yeah.
If he goes beyond that, then it can be
I think,
taken away.
I've heard
It can be
from
taken away.
people, Mabbittsville people, and I said, you should just let James
I
know, you
just-
can go talk to him.
I just
and-
don't understand why it needs to be on in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I don't get that. Just the gas station isn't open 24 hours, so I just don't understand why it needs to be. And you can only see it one way, because coming down the other way, the light pole, the telephone pole is right smack in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So how,
if you change the definition, do you have to have like a public hearing?
I think, if
Yes.
it's in the
Yeah.
code,
If it's
yeah.
in the,
So
yes.
there's a
it's
few-
in
But we
the-
could lump them all, we could lump a
We'll
bunch
lump
of
them all
these.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go through. I mean, how do we, so the thinking, did you write those down because those are things that you are interested in?
I'll take
tackling?
wetlands and solar.
Wait, I
Okay,
have one
hold
more
on.
thing before you say we're finished. Actually, there are some other things in the zoning code that I've gone through and picked up, but I'll email those to you.
Okay.
It's actually like the whole book. So I can't quite email them to you. But I'm passing you now, before we can continue a general code, this is one item that Sarah Wilson had deferred to the town board on. And it relates to the definition of a family. And so
That's what's in our code is the top definition.
yes,
I would pass this on to a family attorney and just let them define it.
so if you
What
want to
does she
read that,
recommend? She recommends.
she recommended defer to the town for review. So
Yeah.
if you can take that home, read through it, let me know what you think, then I will see what each of you say and we'll proceed from there.
Where did these samples come from?
These came from general code,
General code.
yeah. Who,
With no legal review of it?
these are probably from other municipalities' definitions
Yeah.
of what a family member is.
Okay.
This is what she did. She basically suggested that we go through and say, which one do we like? Do we like sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, or sample 4?
Right, or do you want to come up with something
Right.
totally different?
Now, if this is a code review, is this the kind of thing that would go before the planning board? Should we ask for their feedback on that?
We could.
Let me ask, when does this come up as a question?
I have no idea.
During an application process? Or is it more occupancy?
I think, well, I think
Well,
it's going to be.
it's got to be occupancy.
Yeah, I think it's got to be.
So who handles
Because somebody could
occupancy
say
under
they
the
have
code?
100 people in their house and they say, well,
Right.
that's my family.
So
Yeah.
who handles occupancy under the code? The planning board? The
Yeah,
zoning board?
James.
Or
James.
does James?
James
The
does.
administrator.
James does, but I think things like that, and I think having it be really clear is going to be important for your short-term rental, the short-term rental.
I can give
law.
an example. There is a farm in a neighboring town, just on a border, who has a farm housing, and they have about 8 people living in a structure that all appear not necessarily to be related. So that's kind of where.
So then the question comes up, is it a boarding house or is it a family house?
Right.
Okay.
And then because of that, is it a different fire code and different
Correct.
septic?
Yes.
Or is a boarding house
issues,
allowed under the code?
Traffic, all that other
Correct.
stuff.
Number of cars,
Right,
all of those
right,
things.
right.
So, but
Are they,
this,
like the people that, are they farmhouse or,
they are.
okay,
Yeah.
so,
That could be ag.
Well, actually, some of them are farmhouse and some go off property. It could be to another farm that this property owner owns. But it's a one family structure
yeah.
with, what's the family relationship? It's definitely not a mom and dad and children.
But if they're people that work for the farm, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but like
Does-
in our recent application, I know the planning board did ask, what kind of relationship would they be allowing to live on the property? And it was for the winery. And they had talked about a husband and a wife. They knew who they were planning on bringing in there. So it was going to be a husband and a wife and a child. But down the road, if that family moves out, what would the planning board, would it put in your list of restrictions? Is this a family, or is this just several different people
Yeah.
living in the property?
mhm.
So,
Sounds intrusive to me.
So can I, do you mind if we quickly we can see who wants to research it or come back with recommendations or whatever?
do we want to add or just talk about the other ones
sorry,
in the
Mary.
recommendation from the
Wilson?
no, from the comprehensive plan?
Oh,
There were some other items on
Yes.
here. Allow for inns with room limitations and development standards in Abbotsville instead of current allowance of hotels and motels. Continue the current size limitations on non-residential uses within the hamlet of Abbotsville. Develop an NRI, which we're doing. Create a map to activate current environmental protection, which we talked about. Develop short-term rental regulations, which we're doing. Coordinate the aquifer protection area between the town and the village by adopting the same aquifer map for both. Complete the implementation of the remaining 2015 comp plan recommendations.
there's a lot.
So there's a
comp plan
lot, yeah, so
recommendations
there's a
in
lot on
2015.
here that you also want to
Yeah.
address. And there's
So,
one other item.
We're addressing the overlay, and then we're doing these recommendations, right?
Yeah.
So after we're finished with the overlay, we could do a part 2 of the other recommendations.
Pertaining, so that came from the comp plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Shouldn't we catch our breath
Well-
between each? Do you know what I mean?
Right, but this is how we've done it, like we bring everything to the table.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the board chooses, what do
Yeah.
we want to do now?
But we're doing
Right.
the overlay.
Yeah,
And we're
that-
doing these.
that might be
And once
like-
the overlay
like
gets
for-
done,
yeah.
and then we could start doing the part 2 for that,
Yeah, because,
right?
I mean, a
Because
lot,
how are we gonna do, my thing is, if we're doing the overlay and we want a public hearing on that, and then we do all these other recommendations, like, how are we gonna be able to do those at the same time as this? As the, do you know what I mean?
I don't know, I think,
Like,
like,
does
this is.
does that sound like a,
So this little chart
A lot?
that Mary printed out, the reason why, okay, do you see this here? This is what Case had on day 1 of the training as an example, and you can, it's sort of like, what's the priority, high, medium, low? Is the goal short or long? Like, for example, I read the recommendations from the 2015 plan. Some of them have to do with economic studies, with the I mean, some of it's like stuff that is like a huge
yeah,
thing, and I don't think any of, I mean, I shouldn't say, I don't know how all of you feel about it, but that might not be as pressing, for example, as some of this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, that would be something that would be 3 to 5 years from now.
yeah,
So I think we could qualify those recommendations and say, we don't want to take that on right now, that's too much. But like a lot of these things in here, because these committees are seeing some of these things like steep slopes or telecom or
right.
solar, this is easy for us to pick off.
I'm not saying,
Yeah.
like, we're doing this, and we're doing this.
Yeah, but I'm saying there might be little ones like this, nitpicky ones that are in the comp plan. I don't know, but there might be smaller ones
Okay.
that we could add to this.
Okay,
But there might not. They might be all bigger picture items. But like environmental protection map, aquifer map, NRI, those were in
it's
the
just,
2015 plan.
it's just the comp, like, as long as we can do what's in the comp plan review.
So this
We
list.
can't have it, if, whatever we do with the comp plan review,
Is that the comp plan review? Is that the
Yeah.
comp 2015 recommendation?
Oh, no, this is just the most recent comp plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you were talking about.
the hospitality, right,
Mhm.
right. So we're tackling some of it, but what I'm trying to say is, we've given Nan an assignment now.
Yeah.
Then we're doing this. So like, if we can't mix those with this.
Well, we might
Why
be
not?
able to if they're small ones.
Okay, if we can do it ourselves, we can. If we could do it ourselves and we don't need Nan to help us, then we can do
Well, why
that.
don't we, like we said,
Because
let's
we
split
have
them
this
up.
funding
Yeah.
that we can't
Yeah, no.
use that funding to do
Oh,
any
yeah,
of
yeah,
this.
but I think that
Do you
there's some
see what I'm
things
trying
on
to
that list, like the NRI, and they, right,
Right, yeah.
There
Yeah.
might just be a few.
So as
ones
long
that
as
might
we're
be
able to do
necessary.
that, then yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like
Yes.
just light ones, they're not like the, I was thinking the 2015, okay. Define terminology regarding different hospitality uses, including inns and short-term rentals. That's one of the things that Nan's going to do. Coordinate with the village, we've done that.
Yeah.
Section 5 goals of the plan to establish, that's hospitality. Create district, we did that. This is all hospitality stuff. Continue the current size limitations on non-residential uses within the hamlet of Abbotsville. So Mappetsville comes up again. And that has to do with commercial development. It's non-residential uses. It's not a hospitality piece. So I'm just putting that here. Update zoning code site plan review, section 485, to incorporate architectural and site design standards and remove ambiguity in requirements. So I didn't know that our code has requirements in 485. You probably want to look at it. You know, we talked about, and I don't know, but I see that as this part. We don't have to bother Nan with that. Develop architectural and site design standards which are built from the public responses to the visual preference example images used in the open house and community survey outreach efforts. Maybe that's what we use as a reference in the code.
So some of this, when we update the code, like, and then we have to turn around and revisit the comp plan, right? To combine all of this with the one comprehensive plan. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Natural resource inventory, environmental protection overlay, we talked about that. Short-term rentals, Mike is doing that. The aquifer protection area between the town and village by adopting the same map, we've got that. Yeah. Prohibit commercial campgrounds, glamping operations and RV parks, that's in yours, right?
It's ours for short-term rental properties.
Okay,
but you can borrow that and stick it into your zone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then maybe we should add that as a separate thing, since that's going to be its own thing.
But you can pull the same language out of ours.
Okay.
It's been popular.
Complete the implementation of the remaining 2015 comprehensive plan recommendations. That's the one that I'm saying, some of those recommendations are really huge projects that I think are longer term. And if we're going to revisit the plan in 2 years anyway, some of them might not even be things that seem like a priority anymore. I don't know. I can't remember them all off the top of my head. So how do we want to just, I can quickly, you can just raise your hand and tell me if you want to look into it, or how do we want to do this?
Why does somebody just take charge of it and
assign it? I can do that. Yeah, and then do you want to tell me though, email me what you wanted, if there's anything that interested you that you wanted to.
Something we don't want to do, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I'll give it to,
You want wetlands and solar, okay.
Leslie, and I don't know if you have on your list or not, but create new Washington Hollow district.
Yes, okay.
And Hamlet mixed use formula.
And then, Mike, I will help you or work with you on the wetlands thing, because I got all that stuff from the training. Or Margaret should talk to you about it.
I've got the laws too, I'll go back through it.
No, I mean that there's this new watershed protection recommendations that's what my training was about. I will send you my slides too.
I don't need
in your plaque.
Yeah.
Hanging out.
Oh, I've got you, but wait till you see my plaque and then all the slides. Mary, could you repeat that for me again? Create the Washington Hollow
district.
Yeah.
Create new Washington Hollow district. And
that's
revise the Hamlet mixed use formula.
So that's what Nan is working on, the Washington Hollow.
No, she's not. She's just doing the overlay in Washington Hollow,
so
because
Washington Hollow district
is residential.
It's currently R10.
Okay.
We need to fix it. Like I think that and the Mabbittsville, looking at Mabbittsville zoning changes, that's going to be a lot of work and a lot of public opinion, I would think, on both.
Yeah.
And so to me, some of these we might want to, like steep slope and, adult student seat, things like that. Just knock those out and then figure out how we want to tackle the other two, because those I think are a little more complex than the rest. Okay, so I will put all this together and send everybody the assignment.
And as part of working on the assignments, you can pull people in, I'm assuming.
Yes, well, like planning and zoning, I think, particularly that Susan and AK, I will tell you when I assign it to you who made the recommendation, because then you can contact that person and say,
sure, they might want to work on it.
Yeah, like, can you help us, or what are you thinking? And like the wetlands thing, we definitely, Margaret and I have information for Mike. But the solar, like, I don't know, there might be some guidance that,
Solar
planning or
is going
ZBA.
back into that law and really looking at what the buffer zones were and so it wasn't visible from certain areas that needs to be looked at because we had some issues.
Well, I think some of the feedback I've gotten from the discussion I overheard from the planning board, and Richard, you might remember this, was I think it currently talks about not being visible from the road, but it doesn't talk about
Neighbors. But I thought we had, I'll go back and look at it.
Yeah.
And then I'll meet with whomever on the planning board brought it up and we'll talk about it.
Let's talk about neighbors, I talked about the distance, maybe within a certain distance.
Right. Okay.
Um,
I don't think we had how far away a person could view it.
yeah, or if they were,
And the other, I'm
Like
sorry.
a hillside.
So the problem with visibility is that if you have a distance, that's
And
fine.
elevation.
But if you're looking down,
Correct.
you can be seeing it from miles away.
Correct.
So that's pretty hard to deal with.
yeah.
So, and there's more literature on that
We have
now.
some recommendations for that.
One other item that
They're floating them now, you see.
we didn't discuss tonight, but it's been brought up to you, is Joe's request for trucks on particular roads. It had to do with
Wayfaring.
amenia and trees.
Yes.
And Jeff had sent you some potential local laws.
Uh-huh.
Just can't think of,
Oh, yes,
Oh,
you
the
did.
logging?
The
Logging
logging,
and
the
harvesting.
logging, yeah.
yes,
Like the
timber
hollow-
harvesting law.
Yeah, yes.
Timber
Yeah.
harvesting,
Yeah.
right.
I have that.
And the weight on certain roads and culverts.
There was also the CAC, did you not submit it because there was discussion about it?
I can't hear you.
The CAC also had noise ordinance on their list? Or maybe, because I said, don't submit it unless everybody agrees. You can't have like one, they had to submit their recommendations that their whole committee agreed. It wasn't just one person or
I
another.
think there's already a noise ordinance.
There
We
is
faced-
in the
we faced it-
village,
Yeah, in the village, we
but
faced
there's
it up.
not one in the town.
Let's look at the village.
It's impossible to.
Well, it's monitoring, and that's part of it.
Right.
What do you want to adopt zoning that you're never
Can't
ever
monitor.
going to
And what are the repercussions?
follow up on?
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's no enforcement,
You call
is
it-
it worth?
You can't use the word noise, maybe.
Now,
use the
in
word
our solar,
disturbance.
in our short-term rentals, we have addressed noise. So when you get that copy, you'll see that allowable,
Right.
not allowable kind of stuff.
So for the general code, if we can have that by the June meeting, the answer on that one, on family, definition of family.
Yeah, yeah, we
So
can
we
put
can
that on
get
top.
general code printed and put that behind us.
Yep.
Okay.
And any other items to discuss?
No, I had an emergency call from Danielle this afternoon. I ran up to the town park, the drain valve that you open to drain the pool. He's trying to pump the water down and he had it totally empty, I think Friday. And so they were gonna call the guy with the truck he comes in and he sucks all the debris off the bottom. It's like a giant vacuum, like Easy Street, one of those guys. Anyway, he showed up today and they showed up this morning at the park and the water was back up on the bottom. So he turned the pumps back on. He called I forgot who he called, but anyway, he said, no, leave that valve open. That drains.
Tom
the pool."
Fiore?
Oh, Tom Fiore. And so he says, but Tom, water's coming back in through that pipe. No, just leave the valve open. So Danielle was going to call some guy with a camera to go in and see if it had a break in. I said, no, wait a minute. So I ran up and I took a look, and sure enough, if you leave the valve open when it's down real low, water's coming back into the pool. So we were trying to figure it out, like, how can water come back in?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if it was, the stream is higher, than the bottom of the pool and the reservoir is, but you could see water
Gravity.
coming through there.
That's right.
There is some that comes under the ground and up, but we know that. So if you leave the pool for a week, it will get water from under the ground and come back up. So what it is the culvert, the pipe from the bottom of the pool, where it goes out the culvert is silted almost to the top. So that the pipe is under all the silt, and it formed in the stream, there's all this water most of it's going down the stream, but there's like another pond out here in the stream, and it's filtering back down the pipe into the thing. So I says, well, shut the valve off, and we got the sump, the big trash pumps pumping the rest out. So it'll work now, but we got to get at the end of the season, we'll get the village or the town guys with the backhoe, and we'll have to clean this culvert out. We'll have to backhoe it all out. And there's a pile of trees that are down just, 10 feet away that are blocking and keeping all the silt from, running with the water. Just keeps backing it up into the culvert. So they have like a little pond where it's supposed to be draining out.
For figuring that out.
And, the three of us are standing, nobody could figure it out. And I said, there's got to be an answer to this somehow. I went through the weeds and down into the culvert, and sure enough, you could see the culvert was all filled back.